Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. Was poppin' Rick.
What's up?
Oh boy. We're getting closer. We're getting closer to Sunday football.
And this Sunday, for your perspective as a Patriots fan,
Okay.
you can watch.
Mac Jones.
No, they're playing Monday night, so you can actually watch other games. This If you want to.
I see. I thought you were going to ask me who was going to start. Mac Jones.
week. I think that has been established, but I don't know.
My Twitter bio wasn't enough.
What's your Twitter bio? Oh,
Mac
gosh,
Jones truther.
is that in your Twitter bio?
I thought it was. I might have deleted it to. I comment on people's tweets. Specifically ones about Tua sucking.
Okay.
Back in, before Tua had a 46, I was going to say 46 fantasy point game, but back before he had a blow-up game in week 2, I was roasting people. I'm like, Tua blows. Tua sucks. And then they would go and look at Mac Jones and be like, he's better than Mac Jones, and then send me Mac Jones clown face emojis, and I'd be like, can we stop? Can we stop?
It says Justin Fields.
I hope Mac Jones drops 500 yards and 4 touchdowns on Justin Fields' head on Monday night.
I mean, I'll tell you that's more likely than Fields doing that to the Patriots.
That's very true. But anyway, we got buys and sells in this show, so we're gonna forget about Week 7. We're gonna say, "Frick you, Week 7." Hopefully, you get a win anyway. But we're gonna try to help you for Week 7 and moving forward for the next, I think, 4, 5, 6 weeks. Trade deadlines, man, they're coming up, and you gotta make some moves. You gotta make some moves. You gotta improve your team, get your team to a better place than it is right now. That's for dang sure, because I know it's not there yet. Even if you think it is, even if it's 6-0, I don't know nothing about being 6-0 right now. Things aren't going well for me. I don't know what that would feel like, but you could easily go 7 straight losses and go 6-8.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. No, that would be totally wrong. Lose 8 straight games, go 6-8. But either way, today we are going to talk about buys and sells, break that down. Before we do, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platforms, please leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, comment down below. You ready to start with the buys?
Yeah.
All right. Number 1 buy, we got Amon-Ra, wide receiver, Detroit Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, you can peddle this in as many ways as you want. I would love to try to go trade for Amon-Ra St. Brown in our home league, but the team literally named his team after Amon-Ra St. Brown and said he's untradeable.
Oh,
so
great.
I don't think this is a possibility for our league, but it may be a possibility for your league. So the last couple weeks, Amon-Ra has been dealing with an injury, a bye week, and he played a small amount against the New England Patriots, only ended up playing 32% of the snaps in that game. I would imagine that he was either eased back. I can't remember if he was eased back in or if he was hurt. But I know he missed a game against Seattle, started the season with 20, 39, and 13 fantasy points, and then missed the game against Seattle, played in a limited way against New England, and scored 5 fantasy points, and then had a bye week. So the explosion at the beginning of the season goes further back in your mind, and so you start looking at Amon-Ra and being like, okay, when is this guy going to produce for me? It's been 3 weeks, and I haven't had anything. He's coming back against Dallas and Miami. It should be a good matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Detroit needs a receiver back besides, what is the other guy, Khalif Raymond? It's bad.
Josh Reynolds?
Josh Reynolds. Sorry, did I say Khalif Raymond? That was last year.
Yeah, I was trying to think of
Josh Reynolds. But so Amon-Ra St. Brown comes back. You could also bring up the fact that Jameson Williams is coming at some point, and get the person who has Amon-Ra St. Brown to get worried. falsely. I believe in Jameson, but so yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to trade for Amon-Ra. I think what we pegged him to be earlier in the season, which is a wide receiver 1, is going to happen. When he has had, over 70% of the snaps, he has gotten the fantasy points you need for your team, right? And I don't even think he played the full game in Minnesota. So when he's available, he's there, he's getting targets, he's playing well. And I think when that happens again, he'll continue to put up those, 17, 18, 19-point performances on a week-to-week basis. But you just need him healthy and you need him back. And I think that's what makes him a great trade opportunity right now, because he hasn't produced for the team that he's on. And because of that, they might be more willing to sell than they were before. We talked about him being a buy earlier in the season because we thought he was going to be, a breakout wide receiver 1, and we still believe that. Speaking for Rick here, hopefully he believes the same. He'll say that in a second. But I still think he can do that, and we just have to see it. But I think the person that has him is probably a little bit wavering. If you have him right now, you can hold him. If you don't have him, go try to snag him off that Amon-Ra St. Brown owner. Snag him off their team.
Yeah, you got to know when to pivot. I wasn't really that high on Amon-Ra, but like that changed pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
In the offseason, I wasn't that high on him. I had kind of the concern of too many mouths to feed.
Yeah.
Which is kind of my concern for TJ Hawkinson. But with Amon-Ra, it's clear that he is the guy. And even when Jameson Williams returns, Amon-Ra will still have a high target share. And the thing with Jameson Williams that I've been talking about for a while now, saying that he would probably come back after the bye and all this stuff. The latest report says that he's not ready to come off the NFL list, the reserve list.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan Campbell, I don't know if you heard this quote, said that he expects Jameson Williams to play at some point this season.
Oh.
That means he could be back in like week 16.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like he's as close to as people thought he'd be. Like it still feels like he's a couple weeks away at best case scenario, like maybe like 2 or 3 more weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So that just means even more good news for the other guys. And Amon-Ra, ridiculous. In the only 2 games that he really played the full game, he had 12 targets in each game. I don't know if he got injured in that Vikings game or if he just wasn't out there for some of the plays, but his snap percentage was a little lower, and he still had 9 targets. And then against the Pats, he only played like a half of football, and he had 6 targets. Going forward, as long as he's out there healthy, he's gonna get probably 10 targets a week.
Mm-hmm.
And if he does that and he's efficient with it, he's gonna put up high fantasy numbers in an offense that, when everybody's healthy, is pretty good. So it's a great buy. There's going to be some leagues where you're not going to be able to buy him, though, because the guy who has him, like in our league, is obsessed with him.
Right.
But there will be leagues where he is available, or at least when I say available, he could be had, right?
Yeah.
Right. And in those leagues, you should go try to trade for him.
Yep, definitely. Rick, tell us why Lamar Jackson is a buy.
Oh, Lamar!
Yeah, your guy. You did this. You already bought him. You prejudged this a week ago.
I did buy him. Well, with Lamar, he was so good in the beginning of the season.
2 40-point games.
Yeah, two 40-point games is ridiculous. And then last couple weeks he hasn't really done that much, which is why it's a good time to trade him. He's kind of come back down to earth, or trade for him, I should say. The person who has him probably rode those highs in the beginning of the year, and now is like, okay, when are you going to put up those big numbers again, Lamar? And is kind of getting sick, not necessarily sick of him, but they're more open to the idea of trading him, right? Kind of like Amon-Ra. He's no longer an untouchable like he probably would have been after week 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And because that's a good time to trade him, first of all, he has not had Rashad Bateman last couple of weeks, which has been their number one receiver.
Is Beatty coming back?
Bateman, I think is expected to play this week, but we'll see. He's practicing at least.
I gave you the stack I wanted.
Yeah, pretty much.
Frick.
He should be back this week. That will help the passing game because if you look at the stats, what made him have those crazy weeks is yes, his rushing was insane. He had 100 yards rushing in both those games and a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
But he also had ridiculous passing numbers. He threw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in one game.
Yeah.
And then against the Patriots, he had 4 passing touchdowns as well.
Yeah.
And these weeks, his rushing hasn't been as good, but he's still getting like 70 rushing yards a game. It's his passing, only 144 passing yards against the Bills, 174 against the Bengals. This week, he had a better passing numbers. He just turned the ball over a couple times. So, but still only 210 passing yards and 1 touchdown. So, once that changes, I think it's going to start this week. Tampa might be a tough matchup, but after that, it gets real easy for him. Cleveland has not had a good defense this year for some reason. It's weird because Cleveland's defense on paper isn't that bad, but
should be good.
They have struggled. So starting this week, Lamar could take off.
Yeah, it's really those last 3 games. You know what I mean? Cincinnati, Buffalo, obviously good defensively. Giants have been, I don't even know what they do. They breathe on the other team and they somehow choke. 16, 18 the last 3 weeks. And that's in a 5-point touchdown league. So those performances are even worse for you guys. But the big thing that I've noticed is a massive drop off in touchdown production. You know, weeks 1 through 3, he had a total of, I want to say 12 touchdowns. And if you include the rushing in there, 14 touchdowns in 3 games. Since then, he has had 3 total touchdowns in weeks 4, 5, and 6. So I would imagine that at some point, regardless of matchup, he's going to positively regress back into those touchdown performances at least.
Yeah.
Right. So, the big thing for him is just, I think he has to continually put up the rushing numbers to save you on a given week. But he definitely needs the touchdowns back. And when that happens, I think you'll get a big performance from Lamar. And depending on your league, if you're with a bunch of noobs or bad fantasy players, they'll probably ask in a 4-point touchdown league, they'll probably ask for way too much for quarterbacks.
True.
And that kind of pisses me off. But if you're in a league that knows okay, quarterbacks aren't that valuable in a 4-point touchdown league, and it's good to have guys that can rush, you can probably, they can be had for the right price and you don't have to overpay. But if you're in a league where people overpay for quarterbacks, I don't even know if that's a deal you want to do, if it's too much. But if you have the guys, you have the ammunition to get Lamar Jackson, right, I would definitely do it.
Right. That's what it's all about. It's about the situation your team is in. If you're desperate for a quarterback, and you have the depth, then I would definitely go ahead and do it. I mean, I did that. That's kind of in our league. That's the trade that we made. Yeah. My team was really bad at quarterback, or I wouldn't say really bad, but it just wasn't good at quarterback. And I had some decent depth. So that's why I made the trade for Lamar. But yeah, it's definitely a good time to trade for him. And you're right. I don't think matchup really does matter for Lamar. I mean, he put up 44 against the Pats. Yeah. And then I guess Cincinnati is a decent defense, but not great. And he had 16. So it kind of just is what it is with Lamar. But if you're following the trends, because he's been going down, you would expect it to go back up.
Yep. All right, let's talk about the third and final buy, and that is Travis Etienne. This is the long play of the year. The slow, we put Travis Etienne in the slow cooker. Yeah, we're letting him marinate. And Doug Peterson is cross-eyed staring at his board saying, I thought I saw James Robinson get those 25-yard runs. I mean, yeah. So Travis Etienne is, I think, the guy. He's the guy in that backfield. He should be the guy, at least. I can think back earlier to this season where we had Michael Carter go out in the first 2-3 weeks of the season and get most of the work. And then Breece Hall was getting some target share, and then he was getting some running share, and then he was getting 60%, and he was getting 70%. And now he's the guy.
Right.
And I think what's happening in Jacksonville is a slower version of that. on a week-to-week basis, he has consistently outperformed, at least for the last 3 or 4 weeks, James Robinson. And I think ETN is going to end up taking this backfield away from James Robinson at some point. We had him on the show last week. I think it continues to be a good buy because he has not scored a touchdown yet in his career. Like, when the touchdowns start flowing, it's going to be explosive for Travis Etienne. I think this past week he had a touchdown run that got called back, and I was jumping out of my skin. And then the guy got called back, and I'm like, why do you hate us, refs? I mean, I swear. So, yeah, I think, like I said, I think this is the longer version of what happened for the New York Jets. I think ETN will take over this job from James Robinson, and I think at the end of the day, you want to have Travis Etienne because when he takes over this backfield, I think he's a league winner. I think I overpaid a little bit for James Robinson in my draft because I liked him that much, but in a normal reality, it was probably a 4th-round pick, and this is one of those guys similar to Breece Hall that can change a team just based on draft position, where you didn't anticipate them being as good as they are, and he ends up one of those RB1s. So I think that's where it's headed, but there's concern for me with James Robinson where it's just like they continue to force feed him the ball.
They just like him too much.
Even when he sucks. Like,
Right.
it's easy, like, to me, I don't want to spend a whole ton of time on this, but it's easy for me, like, I'm not an NFL coach, so I can't speak to this, but I sit at home and I see just one play of James Robinson, and then I see a play of Travis Etienne where he comes in and he runs for like 20 yards. Like, that to me should be enough. Not taking fantasy out of it. That should be enough as a head coach to be like, okay, all right, James Robinson has like no 20-yard runs, and Travis Etienne does it every other run. Like, that should be enough for you to be like, all right, we need to get this guy more snaps. Just what he has put on tape in the last 2 weeks. And Doug Peterson's not doing that. He's going, we got to keep giving it to the plotter. He's probably sitting there thinking that it's tiring the offensive line down so ETN can get the big runs. Like, I don't know. It's just overthinking everything. That's what NFL coaches do. So ETN will take the backfield, though. It'll happen. Book it.
Yeah, I think it's, in some leagues it might be too late to trade for him. I think he was on this list, I want to say, maybe not last week, but the week before against Philly. But yeah, it's clear that he has definitely been outplaying James Robinson the last couple of weeks. And he's the more explosive option. And I do think, like, you watch the film, you just watch him play, you watch both guys play, and eventually Doug Peterson is going to give him more work. I want to say that he's always had RBBCs though, like even in Philadelphia, if I remember correctly, he's always liked using multiple running backs. So I don't know if that's going to change where ETN is really going to be a workhorse. I don't think that's going to happen, but just give him more than like 11 touches a week.
I think it's packages. 50%. I think it's like he has specific circumstances in a game where he short yardage situation, he needs 2 yards. Who would you rather put in the game, Travis Etienne or James Robinson? Yeah, he's bigger. He'll probably crash through the offensive line if they're stacking the box. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's just how he looks at it. He doesn't. Some RBBC coaches will say, "Oh, I'm going to go with the hot hand," or "Oh, I'm going to go with the guy that, like, Seattle has done that for a long time. I'm going with the hot hand."
Yeah,
and
I agree. I think it's package.
I don't think Doug Peterson goes with the hot hand. I think he just sees what packages they're going in, and he says, "Okay, this is the circumstance in the game." And sometimes it lends to Travis Etienne, sometimes it lends to Doug Peterson, to James Robinson. Where I think, at some point you do have to, as a coach, look at the success one player is having and be like, all right, because he's not going to be – the big thing about Travis Etienne that people need to realize is that he's going to be like Alvin Kamara in the aspect that he's not going to get workhorse numbers. He's not getting 25 to 30 touches a game like Derrick Henry will. He's not built for that. He's built for, 10 to, I'll say 12 to 15 carries and like 3 to 5 catches. That's what he's built for. So – but his fantasy upside is that he's a pass-catching running back. So there's the aspect of Travis Etienne. The big thing that you need to see flip, because I think what he's doing right now, like if he gets 60% of the work, I'm okay with that. But like what you need to see flip for Travis Etienne is his touchdown production. And I think if they start giving him the red zone opportunities and not James Robinson, and it flips, then Etienne will start scoring the touchdowns. Robinson will lose mostly all the fantasy value he has left at this point, and Etienne will be the guy.
Yeah, the only thing is, like, I think Robinson will probably stay the goal line back, which will hurt for Etienne. But there's been opportunities for Etienne to get touchdowns this year.
Tell me about
where
it.
It's not necessarily he's on the goal line.
Yeah,
there's been like 3 or 4 plays.
I don't know if I hate Etienne's freaking metal pan hands in the red area or Saquon Barkley sitting down at the 1 yard line.
It's so weird because Etienne's a good pass catcher, but he does drop a couple passes. Like he's dropped it.
I would say it's because he's trying to get used to the quarterback, but they played together at Clemson, so I would imagine.
Yeah, I think he's just.
I would imagine they would figure that out.
He looks ahead. But, he's one of those players that looks ahead before the ball's in his hands.
And he'll figure that out eventually.
Yeah. I'm not worried about that long term, but I think there'll be opportunity for him to get touchdowns. Mm-hmm. I mean, last couple of weeks he's been doing really well. Considering he's not getting touchdowns. I mean, if you add a touchdown both these weeks, that's like 20 and 18 fantasy points. So, pretty good weeks. And even without the touchdowns, he's a flex, 12 to 14 points.
He can. I think in terms of like when you go out and you try to buy him, like it's not going to cost a lot. You know what I mean? Like you're not talking about like for me, if you came to me with the right deal, I'd probably trade Etienne. You know what I mean? As a person who has ETN in a couple of leagues. But it just depends on like what the situation is, right? So, but there's not like there are players that I have that I would never trade in certain leagues. And, and I think for the most part, if you have ETN, you've been dealing with these 8, 12, 13, 14 point weeks and they're just, not getting you across the finish line. If you're losing weeks, then it's like, I got to trade this guy because if somebody comes up to me and says they want him, I'm going to deal him. Whereas I'm saying you got to hold him. And I'm telling myself you got to hold him because the breakout is coming. You just have to be patient with it. So, but it's not going to cost a lot to get him. That's the point.
Right.
So anyway, you want to move on to sales?
Yeah.
All right, so first guy that we're talking about selling this week is Brandon Ayuk, and I like Brandon Ayuk. Earlier this year, I was like, you need to buy him. And the only reason why he's on the sell list this week for me is because I think that this big 28-point game is sellable. I think that it's not that I don't like him. It's not that I think he's going to go downhill rest of the season. It's not because I think his target share is going down. I like Ayuk. If you choose to hold him, you can hold him. But I don't think Brandon Ayuk's getting a 28-point a game again this season. I don't think this is leading to a Amon-Ra St. Brown like breakout like last year where he just gets 20 points a game every week and he's the new Debo. Like I don't think that's going to happen. I think Ayuk had a really big week, and I think the Ayuk people like myself would pay money to get that. So if you can take advantage of some player having a big game, then I would take advantage of it. And Brandon Ayuk is one of those guys.
Yeah, this won't happen again. It's the 49ers offense is they don't throw the ball enough for this to happen on a week-to-week basis. Garoppolo had 41 pass attempts. His previous season high was 30.
Yeah.
So that's 11 more. I don't think that's going to happen again. And yeah, if he throws 40 times a week, then sure, Ayuk will get some fancy production, but otherwise, he's going to have weeks like he has been all season, which is a couple of games with 4 targets. Then he'll get a game with 8 targets, and then another week with 4 targets. So like, it's kind of gross and inconsistent. You probably can trade him right now, sell it as a breakout, but I don't think it's a breakout. I'm a little lower on Ayuk. I do like the player, but with Garoppolo there, like I just think like he's going to be kind of what he is. Which is like, or what he's been this year, which is just like 10 fantasy points. So like he's a low end flex, sure, but I don't think like this week to me is an anomaly. I don't think he does this on a week to week basis at all.
There'll be weeks where he's like, because I think his floor is like 10 points. And when he scores a touchdown, he gets into the 16 to 17 category.
I mean, before this week, his previous season high was 12 fantasy points.
Yeah. So I don't like. I like him. He's definitely like second flex worthy.
Yeah, I like him.
Flex worthy, but yeah,
I like him long term.
Yeah, definitely. Number 2, don't like this guy as much long term. Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah,
he is going to have a big game this week. I do think that. I think he'll have a good game. He could. And if that happens, that just boosts the trade value. So maybe even just wait past.
We're not going to change our minds this week if Zeke gets 20 fantasy points.
Yes, we're not changing his mind. We're not changing our minds on this. So maybe even wait a week until that happens. But Zeke had a good game against a tough run defense in Philadelphia. There is a major concern with Ezekiel Elliott. Massive big things. Massive big concerns. No pass catching opportunity. He gets about 15 carries a game on average and 1 catch if he's lucky.
Yep.
And he's basically just become a running back without any pass catching work. And so basically what that means for Ezekiel Elliott, especially in PPR leagues, is that he has to there was a game where he had 17, 18, 19 carries, which is 17, 18, 19 opportunities in the game, and he put up 80 yards. But because he didn't catch a pass and he didn't do anything else, he only got 8 fantasy points. So it's like, and that is considered a bust game when in reality, like 80 yards rushing in a football game in the NFL is usually a good thing.
Right.
Oh, like, but it's like, that's the situation you have with Zeke where it's like, he's basically become a touchdown dependent running back where he has to score a touchdown in order to have success. He did that against Philly. He had a good rushing game against them, got better as the game went along. I was actually, he doesn't look old. Like, it doesn't look like he's a bust. It just looks like they're not using him the same way they were 4 or 5 years ago. So Zeke at this point to me is a sell. I think you can, ride this good matchup. Maybe, next week he scores a touchdown. He has a good matchup. You can sell him off that as well. But I would sell him before the trade deadline because I don't want to hold this guy in the playoffs and then get burned because he didn't score a touchdown in a matchup.
Yeah, I mean, Zeke's another guy where it might be, although for him it might be too late to sell him, but it actually is a perfect time to do so because he's played well last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. I think he has a good week this week against Detroit. And then you can be like, look, it's Zeke, and he's been playing well. It's Zeke, and
he's
then
back.
The situation is gross. Him and Pollard are close to a split. Zeke still gets more work than Pollard, but Pollard does get a decent amount of work. And Zeke, as you said, doesn't get any passing game work anymore. Like, he used to be a guy that would get you.
Yeah, there's a season where he had like 80
up to 95.
90
yeah, there was a year where he had 95 targets. Even last year, his receiving game went down, and he wasn't used as much, but he still had 65 targets and 47 receptions.
Right now, he's getting targeted like Derrick Henry.
Right. I mean, even worse, to be honest. 8 targets on the season is really disgusting. 6 catches for 32 yards, 4 yards a catch. Like, that's
he might hit 30 targets.
5 yards a catch, yeah. He might.
Yeah.
Thanks to the extra game, he might, but we'll see. It's still gross, though. Not what you want out of a PPR running back unless he's, just absolutely killing people on the ground like Derrick Henry, which Zeke has been doing decent, but he's not at that level at this point in his career. So he's a great, great sell right now.
Yep.
I'd much rather have some of those younger guys at running back than Zeke.
Yep. Agreed. And then the final guy we have on the sells list is Juju Smith-Schuster. I'm disappointed. I thought Juju was going to be much better this year, and this is more or less like 6 weeks into the season. We know what the Chiefs look like at this point. Juju has been getting targeted. He's had 4 games with 8 targets, so that's good news. But he's just not like producing on a week-to-week basis at a high level. 11, 4, 13, 9, 6. Like those numbers for the first 4 weeks before he caught a touchdown this week are just gross. And this past week he had 5 targets, 5 catches, 113 yards, and a touchdown against the Buffalo Bills. So really good performance for him. He has seen over the last 2 weeks an increase in snap percentage. But I think what we saw over the first couple weeks of the season here, the first 6 weeks, is what you're going to get out of Juju. There's going to be weeks where he puts up 13, 14, 15 fantasy points, maybe jumps into the 20 conversation, and then there are just going to be weeks where he just doesn't do anything, and it's going to be 5, 6 points, and he's just not reliable on a week-to-week basis as a start. And so I feel like at this point, your opportunity to sell him and the window that you have to sell him at this point is closing. And with this big game that he just had, you're cracking it open a little bit more, and you can maybe deal him away to a team that believes in the Chiefs and is still looking for that number one Chiefs wide receiver like we all are, and I think Mahomes is too. But it's just like at this point, like I think what you see is what you get with Juju, and I don't think I think he's a low end wide receiver too, but you could probably sell him as a high end wide receiver too right now. To somebody that loves Juju and believes.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the Chiefs do have their wide receiver one, it's Travis Kelce. And then the rest of the actual wide receiver group is just a bunch of guys who...
Hey, don't call Sky Moore a bunch of guys.
Sky Moore is right now just a bunch of guys. Maybe he can develop into a good player, but he hasn't really had a lot of opportunity either, but... like some weeks it's MVS, some weeks Hardman gets opportunities and doesn't do anything with it, and then Juju gets opportunities
in KC.
Who knows?
Elijah Moore.
I will say of those three, Juju is still obviously the best option, but yeah, it's gross, dude. Trade him if you can. Coming off a big week, still only had 5 targets, 5 catches. I was thinking, in the offseason, I was really high on Juju, not just because he could be the wide receiver one with the Chiefs, but I was like, he could be a wide receiver one with the Chiefs, which is an elite offense and a team that will pass the ball a good amount. So I was expecting a high number of receptions this year, a high number of catches for Juju, and that I've been a little disappointed with. Like 27 catches on the season, I thought he would be a little bit higher than that, and then I obviously expected more than 1 touchdown as well. Yeah. So those two have been disappointing for me. Juju, I was definitely high on, but now I'm just not. I've seen enough, as you said, from that Chiefs offense where we know what it looks like. Juju is kind of honestly playing the same role he did in Pittsburgh, just with the Chiefs, which is kind of gross.
Less efficient still,
like a lot of
kind of is wacky.
Yeah, a lot of the big plays that the Chiefs look for go to Hardman or
and I was gonna say
MVS.
it looks like the Chiefs are looking at Juju as a guy. Like it seems like Mahomes is trying to get him the ball. Yeah. And trying to make him the wide receiver one, and he's just not. The way the Chiefs have played football over the last 4 years with Mahomes has been just like chuck it down the field to Tyreek. Right. And Juju's not that player. You know what I mean? Like he's just not that player. So
even his he had a big play, and that is what led to a lot of his fantasy points. But it was like a 10-yard pass that he a lot of yards. He turned around, made a guy miss, and 2 guys ran into each other, and then he got a 40-yard touchdown out of it.
So it's one of those things where it's like he's just not. He catches. I guarantee you if you look at his, I don't know, I don't have it in front of me, but if you looked at his ADOT, it's probably pretty low compared to the rest of the receiving core even there. So I am still looking for the Chiefs wide receiver. I think that will come this year at some point. And I honestly think it's Sky Moore, but we'll see. Well, it might just stay like this.
Yeah, who knows?
But anyway, there are your buys and sells for week 7. As you enter into this week, try to make these deals and see what happens. Preferably before the football games on Sunday. So you can do that. But we've got a lot of football this Sunday. Enjoy it. Hopefully you don't lose. We'll see you later, guys.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.